On Tuesday, the Canadian Football League and Commissioner Randy Ambrosie announced that the league would be seeking $150 million in a bailout from the federal government. $30 million for now, $120 million in the event the league could not play this year. Question is, should the government be bailing out professional sports leagues? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. CFL Commissioner Randy Ambrosie this week announced that if there is no 2020 season, the CFL would be financially devastated. It would be devastating to the league. Those are his words. As a result, Rick Zamperin, should the Canadian government be coming to the aid of the league and bailing it out?
I don't think so. I think the Canadian Football League, like any other league, is a company, a business that has employees and obviously some employers. When you look at some of the millionaire or multimillionaire or dare I say billionaire owners, and I think it's incumbent on the league to build up some sort of war chest, whether it's labor strife or economic strife. I know these are unprecedented times. No one saw this coming. The NHL didn't, the MLB, Major League Soccer, NBA. But at the end of the day, the CFL being a business, and I know businesses are getting bailouts and handouts from the government, but all that money is eventually going to be paid back in some way or form, whether it's through taxes or another means. I don't think the CFL should get a handout from the federal government.
Well, Rick says that perhaps the CFL should have built up some sort of war chest or had some money set aside for a terrible situation. This is a league, though, that seems to operate on the thinnest of margins. Is that a realistic thing to expect of the CFL?
Well, I mean, aren't we all told from a very young age to have a piggy bank for the rainy day? This is actually rather shocking to me. And I know when we talked about, the prospects of our 8 and 9 game season just a couple of days ago, I might have been the guy that kind of came off in a doomy and gloom sort of with an attitude kind of like that. And now this news that breaks it, $150 million is a lot of money to be expecting from the public in several ways. And I think what really extends the shock of this is that the league doesn't plan to repay this loan. I mean, they want to help. Sorry?
Not in cash, in kind, in some other way.
But I mean, they're talking about doing community initiatives, anti-bullying. This is stuff that the league does anyway. So to me, this is, I'm not going to say irresponsible, but I think this is a real stretch here because it opens the door for many, many, many people to be upset about millionaire owners with sport. And I know we're all sports guys, but I mean, it's sport, not real life.
Steve, the trouble with this, the difficulty is Randy Ambrosie, if he's right, says that this could be essentially, between the lines, this could be the end of the CFL. So you're making a decision on bailout or potentially the league dying. That's what the position seems to be.
Well, and I know they've been meeting hard and fast on this for a long time. And it is, as both guys said earlier, a very, very difficult sell and a concept thing here. I don't know that it would kill the league 100%. Obviously, there could be a slight bit of exaggeration here, but I think it's pretty close to things because I think for them to be out of the public eye on TV and in their communities, but particularly on TV, because it actually does fairly well on TV and was starting to rebound that way, particularly towards the ends of the season, while the NFL apparently will play, or at least will have something on TV, which was the problem in the first place with this league. They lost a whole generation, maybe a generation and a half with the blackouts, right? So people actually your age, Scott, are the people that they lost.
Yep.
I don't know that they could afford to do that again, and it could be devastating besides all of the other problems. However, I think it's unfair to characterize this. Yes, there are 2 billionaires that own teams in this league. They don't make any money, I can guarantee you that. The Ticats are breaking even the last 2 years, but only on operating costs, not if you include, I think, the cost of money, because there hasn't been any, because Bob Young's given them that money. So it's in the position where you could sell that team if the COVID hadn't come, and somebody could maybe make at least break even on it. So it's a very best a break-even thing, at the very worst, a philanthropical effort. The other yeah, I think the other thing you have to say is this isn't the same as other leagues. And I've said this forever. If you think the CFL is just a business or just a league, or both of those, limited to just those, it is not. They want to be, they want to run business that way, but that's not all that they are. What they really are is a cultural institution. So that has to be examined. All this all has to be examined in the eye of that. Now, I think you have to repay this loan in some form, whether you spread it out over 50 years or what. You've got to have that optic. However, if you don't look at this as a cultural institution and don't examine it, you don't understand what the CFL and the Grey Cup can bring to this country. It's why I've always been against the possibility of a West-West Grey Cup. There's a symbol there, and you need to live by symbols. And the CFL is a symbol for that. And we find that most weeks during the Grey Cup, and we work backwards from there. And I talked to Randy about this earlier in the year. Do not destroy that East-West Grey Cup. Get rid of that crossover, and don't ever think of going top 2 teams, because you will lose that cultural institutional value.
That's a discussion that we're going to have on another one of these down the road, assuming there's a CFL to have that discussion with. But could you not argue that if the CFL is a cultural institution, and I don't disagree with that, but you could say the exact same thing for the NHL, because it's a part of our fabric of our culture. Could you not say
it's not based here?
But what about other leagues? There's lots of other leagues around this country, not of the same magnitude as the CFL. But Bubba, you could say, look, every other league now that has some sort of footprint in the country deserves now to have a bailout too.
You know, and we're of an ilk in the age gap from, I think Rick is the youngest and Steve is the oldest, where you're right. I mean, the CFL is a cultural institution, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think that there's generations behind me, at least, that really believe that way. And I think, yeah, it is important to respect history. But at the end of the day, in a situation that we're in, the CFL is a business and it has to be run as such. And I think in terms of public perception, for most people across this country, especially of a younger age, that's the way they're going to look at this league. And I think it opens Pandora's box. Hey, if this happens and CFL do get a handout of any sort, maybe not $150 million. If I'm, say, Commissioner Mike Morreale of the Canadian Elite Basketball League, where's my handout? What about the CPL? What about the Intercounty Baseball League? And we're only talking about local leagues within our area. If you're Hockey Canada, who just lost the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, which is something that it brings up 18-year-old hockey players, the Ontario Hockey League. I mean, everyone's going to want a piece of the pie. And I think you're walking down a dangerous zone by, asking for that type of a handout without a financial payback.
Rick, can you discriminate between, not discriminate, that's not the right word. Could you make a case that the CFL is different from any of those other leagues that Bubba is talking about, so it should get a handout and the others shouldn't because of the cultural impact?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you probably could, but, the federal government has to tread carefully here too, because, if we're going down the cultural institution kind of, avenue, what about the CNE, which hasn't canceled yet? The Calgary Stampede has, which has just a rich history as the CFL or the CNE. Other events that haven't even been canceled yet. What about tennis events? What about, the Rogers Cup canceling a few weeks ago? This is a rabbit hole that I don't think the federal government wants to go down at a particular time where we're in a pandemic and people are dying. Let's not forget Fort McMurray, Alberta. Major flood situation there. What if the federal government gives the CFL, let's say $30 million, and gives Fort McMurray, Alberta $10 million? Let's just say pie in the sky. Optically, that looks horrible. People are dying, people are being flooded out of their waters, and you're giving a sports league millions of dollars. It's not going to sit well with the public.
Those are all excellent points. And as I mentioned earlier, the optics here are very, very, very difficult. And that's why I think there has to be some kind of at least promise of some kind of payback, more than payback in kind. The difference between all of those leagues that you guys have been talking about in this one, of course, is history. And that, in a way, has been a bit of a problem with the CFL selling its own history. We do a great job of telling our stories once. The Grey Cup stories that are told in November are incredible. What the trouble is, we don't tell them in January, February, March, and April. If most of the things that had happened in and around the Grey Cup and the CFL had happened in the Super Bowl, there had been stamps, 3 Disney movies, and 4 statues. That, of course, isn't the case. then that's been one of the problems in the CFL. And part of that is because they've had to spend, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, they had to spend about 15 years just barely surviving. The second thing is, I think the jobs that they create in their markets and have created for quite a long time, whether they're short term or not, people tend to, and it keeps the stadiums alive too. And don't forget, if the stadiums die in those cities, then other things die with them. They don't have an anchor tenant, so that stadiums would start to degenerate. And if eventually we get back to concerts or other types of things, those don't happen. But because the stadiums are going to be falling apart. I mean, and those are all types of things. I think they've got to find a way to make this look right, and then shift it over to the cultural side, and also add it to the business part of it. And I agree with all you guys that it has to be. The CFL is trying to run itself, and has been. The CFL is actually, in the last few years, been a pretty good business. They've had some issues, but not like they used to have. We don't think about it not surviving until this year. I mean, we really weren't thinking about that. It really hasn't been an issue. There's been problems in certain markets, but you've always felt that, I mean, Montreal, really, they had something good happen there this year. Toronto, in a way, has something good, even though nobody's going to the games because of the ownership. It's a problem, but we got to figure that the ownership is going to hang around there because they want to sell popcorn at the stadium that they control. So those are, and they need, some programming for a network that they can, well, they're not really part of that network, but it does own part of them. So there's a lot of prongs to this thing. The problem is, as you guys are all pointing out, and I agree with, the picture of this doesn't look very good. You got to find a way to make it look a whole bunch better.
Rick, would it look different if it wasn't being an ask for a gift, essentially, of 150 million? If the CFL said, look, give us 30 million, we will pay you back cash, not public service announcements, in time, maybe 10 years, we will pay you back whatever money we need to make this thing work. If this was a loan, would anybody even be blinking?
Yeah, I mean, if this was some kind of deferred payment program, I don't think it would be making the waves that it is, given that, in the times that we are. But if this is hey, you got to pay this, whatever the amount is, back over 20, 50, whatever amount of time, I think that the public could digest this and be okay with it.
I just don't
has this been generalized too much? Do we know the specifics of this? This is what I don't.
It's been pretty general. We've just been told that it's 30 million now, and up to 120 million if the league doesn't play this year as a package. As for the very, very specifics, I haven't seen what the very specifics are. But right now, it's a $30 million immediate payment.
This little discussion is not as much analysis as really combined advice to the league by us four, right?
Well, I'm surprised that they haven't really thought about this too, and pulling at the heartstrings of Canadians at this point for a sports league just doesn't work, in my opinion. And I just think that there are people in this country that are hurting right now. And I know, Rick, you talked about that earlier. There are bigger concerns in the Canadian Football League at this point, in the minds of many Canadians, young and old. As Rick said, people are dying, for crying out loud here. And the viability of the Canadian Football League, despite its history right now, will not be in the forefront of many Canadians. And again, I say that as a sports fan, a sports announcer, commentator, someone that embroils himself in sports. I'm just looking at this on a realistic point there, folks.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really hard sell, especially you can make the case, and some people will, that the CFL already has paid for most of BC Place, has paid for most of the renovations to a bunch of the stadiums, is being asked now by the CFL to pay for a new stadium in Calgary, paid for Tim Hortons Field at various levels of government. The argument will be made, look, the government has already bailed out the CFL more than once. And so how many times do you bail this league out? And it's a difficult position the league is going to find itself in, to say how many times do we need government handouts before we can argue we are operating by itself? I know the CFL is unique from the NFL and other leagues. This is not a wish for something bad to happen to the CFL. It's just a really hard position to make for Randy Ambrosie.
Well, I'm going to be a little picky about some of the generalizations there. The Pan Am Games actually paid for Tim Horton Field.
But it was levels of government. It was government that paid.
Oh, levels of government, of course, and yes, you had to have an anchor tenant to get those things, and that's that. You decide, do you want stadia in the city, and then when you're building, the way it usually starts with stadia, do you want a stadium in the city? Well, one of the things is, who's your anchor tenant, right? Now, it usually comes in reverse, at least visually, because it looks, for instance, in Calgary, which is a good point, the people are going there to ask for a stadium. But if it was going to happen, it was going to happen because of the Olympics, or if they had been able to get it together for the 26 Pan Am Games. And of course, the oil economy, long before COVID, hurt that for them. So it's a very difficult thing. I'm surprised that I don't know if the CFL is trying for a public appeal here to try to get support on their side. If they are, it's a misread.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone think, though, that if the CFL season, the 2020 season, was canceled, yes, it would be financially devastating, but does anyone think that the league could not come back next year? I know, obviously, the coffers would be empty, but the league would still be here, would it not?
I think so. But I think we always worry about Toronto. I think that's been a question for at least 2 decades, is how can the CFL, or could the CFL be a viable league in this country without a Toronto market? Because as I've said several times, I have a lot of people in Toronto, and they're not CFL fans. They don't go to CFL games. They might be sort of closet and show up at the Grey Cup, but I think Toronto would be in serious trouble. And we talked about Montreal, the new owner. How much is he willing to suck up without a season? BC David Braley's been trying to unload that team for a couple of years now, and we're seeing problems. Maybe not problems, but a bad team in Ottawa. I mean, they couldn't have made much money last year. So to me, that's almost half the teams that are financially kind of walking a tightrope right now. We're very lucky here in Hamilton that we have the owner that we do, that not only supports a football team, but a soccer team as well. So I just think there are a lot of questions here. I do think the league will continue, but how it will look is certainly up for grabs.
Yeah, the tightrope part is why it makes this thing potentially more devastating, because, I mean, I think the positivity in Montreal, you saw it at the end of the season. That was really before the owner actually had thrown any money into it, and he's willing to throw some money into it. Now, I don't know where his business sits with the movies, right? I mean, they're hurting too, because they can't produce at the moment. But yeah, I think it could probably start up again, but it would really be starting for a deep hole, not just in specific markets. But let's not forget, there's another aspect to this. There's another business involved in this, and that's TSN.
Well, okay. Should TSN, like, again, this is not our money. It's easy to talk. No. It's easy to talk about when it's not our money.
Yeah.
But should TSN be saying, look, we need this league for our summertime programming. I know what our contract is and how much we have to pay for rights, but should we be chipping in more to say, look, we feel a need to contribute to this as well? Or is that completely unfair to put any of that on the backs of the public or on the backs of the broadcaster?
Oh, I think it's already there. I don't know this for a fact, but I can't imagine that it's not already a big part of the behind the scenes discussion. But that one's a trickier out loud discussion than, because, well, I mean, we could put it this way. There are other networks that besides them that could cover the CFL, and there are 2 sports networks, blah, blah, blah. But it is a business that employs an awful lot of people in a lot of markets, both nationally and locally. So I would be very surprised, Scott, if there haven't been long discussions there about what TSN can actually do here, what they're able to do financially. Who knows? Sports networks have been hurting for a little while, the last little while, because the business.
I think TSN would definitely. Sorry, go ahead, Bubs.
No, I'm just saying, and you're right. The business model for sports networks has changed from when I first started working at Sportsnet, 20 years ago. The need for highlight shows is almost disappearing. They continue to do highlight shows because they need the Canadian content, quite honestly. No one runs to the television to watch these shows like they did when you and I, all of us, were growing up. Again, people have been laid off at TSN because of the pandemic currently. They're not having shows. There's no content. I mean, how many more top 100 and top 50 shows can we all digest? They need programming, and they need it badly. But at what cost? And remember, it's not just a company, TSN, it's Bell Globe Media. How much money will they be on a big scope be willing to contribute to keep a league that, you know what, is sort of, again, walking a tightrope? When they look at it as a business model, is it something that is good for their future as well?
How many parts of Bell, and while we're on it, I mean, there must be at least one division of their company that's doing fairly well during this, and that would be anything to do with online stuff, wouldn't it? With the services
and mobility as well. And the
Yeah,
one thing that
mobility, yeah.
TSN would want is ROI, return on investments. So if they're going to put a product out that they know the fan base wants because we are starved for content, they want that return on investment. So are they going to get enough sponsorship dollars? Are they going to get a cut of anything that the league makes because of, they're now in partnership or helping in this bailout process? We all saw with the NFL draft record numbers, and that was a virtual draft. We're so starved for new content, sports-wise, that we're going to dive to our TV sets or tablets or whatever the case is. So, TSN would definitely want the content, but they want to make it financially make sense as well.
We got to wrap. Sorry, Steve, finish, and then we got to wrap up.
Give you one thing. A microcosmic example of that, Rick, is that the CFL draft on TSN is usually an hour. Tomorrow night, it's 2 hours.
Mm. We're going to see.
Yeah.
Just
is anyone excited about the draft?
Some are. No. You know what, Bubba? I bet it will get some decent ratings for what Steve just said and for what everyone just said, because people are desperate for something new. You brought it up. It's absolutely true. Anything that is new, that is sports-ish, that isn't a top 100 show, people will watch. I bet they'll do very well on this draft show today.
Yeah.
This is going to be really interesting, though, because this news, this $150 million is brand new. Just found out about it late Tuesday. Next few days, we're going to be seeing, I think, very strongly what the feedback and what the sentiment is around the country. And it'll be really interesting to see how Randy Ambrosie and anyone else in the CFL starts to massage this and reposition this and try and formulate the tugging at the heartstrings attitude to try and get the government and the people to buy into this. I'm sure we'll be talking about this down the road. We appreciate you watching. You can find our Twitter on the screen right now. You can also find it at the end. Just stick around. They'll all pop up on the screen. We would love to hear your response to this as well. Do you think that the Canadian government or any form of government should be bailing out the CFL or any sports leagues? Thanks for doing it. We'll talk to you again soon.